When it comes to resin printing, what's the most important thing to you? In other words, when you're in the market for a resin printer, what are you looking for? Do you like really small pixel sizes? A large build plate? What is it? For me, it's none of these things. I don't care how detailed a print is, how many figurines I can fit on my build plate, or even how fast it prints, if I'm not using the printer. I know that sounds weird, but just stick with me for a moment. See, I've been printing on my Saturn II now, and I recently got a GK2 from Uniformation. They both have fantastic spatial resolution, they both have large build plates. I mean, they're workhorses. My Saturn once ran for a month straight, working the entire time without a single failure. But since using the GK2, I've discovered that what I like most about a printer is its convenience. So many times I've found myself with a finished print upside down on the build plate, just sitting there for days, because I didn't want to deal with scraping the plate off, figures tumbling off my desk. Sometimes just the thought of that alone would prevent me from processing my build plate. This is where the subject of today's video comes in. At first I thought I'd hate it because other people hated it, but I kind of think they're wrong now. Well, maybe. The product in question is the Wham flexible build system. Basically, there's a magnet that you stick to the bottom of your build plate, and then you stick these flexible spring steel sheets to the bottom of it, and this is your new build plate. Basically, the resin cures on this side, and then you can just peel this off of the build plate, and there's your prints. And then you can just pop them off by flexing the build plate. Seems great, right? I mean, that's what I thought when I bought it 8 months ago, but I only just got around to installing it a couple weeks ago. After reading a ton of negative reviews on it, after I'd already purchased it, I started to dread installing it. I mean, I rely on the reliability of my Saturn II. I was very worried about layer shifts and the loss of the ability to use my entire build plate. Another reason I delayed was because it turns out it's a 72-hour process from start to finish to get the build plate installed. At the time, I needed to run my printer pretty much day and night, so that wasn't an option for me. I finally decided I would just go ahead and install it. I mean, worst comes to worst, I wasted some money and I can just remove it and then keep printing on the original build plate after cleaning it up a bunch. So, I finally bit the bullet. I cracked open the package and found that it came with 2 spring steel sheets, the large magnet, some stickers, and 2 sheets of sandpaper. Now at the beginning of installation, I discovered something seriously wrong with my resin printer. If you want to see that, it's in the top right. But besides that, installation was very straightforward. It doesn't require any specialized tools, but it does require you to print out a part needed for installation before you get started, but I'll get to that in a bit. The first step was to completely clean the build plate off. It didn't need to be super thorough, but we just wanted all of the resin off of it. We're basically just prepping it to be sanded down. The next step was to sand the build plate. This gives the magnet adhesive a really good surface to adhere to. In the official Wham installation video, they have a very large piece of 220 grit sandpaper, basically clamped down to the desk, and then they pass their build plate over it. And this is a great method to basically make sure your build plate is sanded evenly and that you have a flat surface to work with. The piece of 220 grit sandpaper that they supply isn't big enough to do this, but I went ahead and used it and I think it did good enough. It didn't take too much sanding, just enough so that you could see those circular marks across the entire build plate. After the sanding part, we need to do a very thorough cleaning of the build plate. Start off with some warm soapy water, just clean off the build plate the best you can to remove any grease that you've applied during sanding. Then use the highest strength IPA you have, preferably over 90%, to wash the build plate off. Wipe it off until you stop seeing metal dust on your paper towels. Once you don't see it anymore, wipe it off a few more times. After you're confident in your cleaning job, we're going to want to submerge the build plate in, again, high strength IPA for at least an hour. The longer the better though. Again, the more effort you put in here, the longer life your magnet is going to have and the better performance it will have overall. But now that we're done prepping the build plate, go ahead and let it dry for a little bit, let all the IPA evaporate. In the next part, we're going to apply the magnet to the build plate. It's basically like adding a screen protector, but maybe not as bad. You're going to take the protective backing of the adhesive side, and you're going to fold it down about 1 centimeter or 2, and then you're going to line the other side of the magnet up to your build plate. This fold prevents the adhesive sticking to the build plate until you've lined the magnet up with the build plate. Once you're confident in the alignment, you press down on the middle part of the magnet, and then you spread outwards. Seriously, take your time with this, roll your thumbs out, make sure you're not getting any air pockets left under the magnet, because that will severely affect the performance of it. Now you're basically going to repeat this step. You're going to fold another 1 centimeter or 2 of the paper back, and then you're going to work down the middle of the magnet and roll your thumbs out making sure that no air pockets are back. I even went back up the magnet to parts that I'd already rolled out. Once you've finished applying the magnet, now comes the hardest part: waiting. You need to wait at least 72 hours for the adhesive to cure to the build plate. Again, just don't rush this. This will ensure that the flexible build system performs the best and lives the longest. Now, while you're waiting for the magnet's adhesive to cure, there is one thing that you can do. I mentioned that little part that you had to print out. It's basically the spacer for the Z sensor. Now that we've added this magnet to the build plate and we're going to add this spring steel sheet, the build plate is going to be thicker than it was before. So since we added all this thickness to the build plate, if you were going to home your printer right now, then it would push the plate through your screen. To prevent this, you either need to re-level by loosening your screws and hoping that you have enough wiggle room to account for those few millimeters, or you can install the spacer, which is my recommendation. It's a tiny piece that extends the arm of the Z sensor so that it triggers earlier. There are a lot of parts out there for the Z spacer, so there's likely one for your printer. Wham Bam has a page that links to a bunch of those spacers out there. I printed mine using an FDM printer, but if all you have is a resin printer, then just make sure to print it before you start installing the flexible build system. After the adhesive was done curing, I put the build plate on my printer, and I went ahead and leveled the bed. So now that everything was set up and ready to go, it was time for me to start printing. And what a time it was. I started out with a simple exposure test, and I'm not even sure if it stuck to the build plate at all. By the end of the print, there was just a thick blob of cured resin on the FEP sheet. I did some reading online, and people recommend that you up the bottom exposure time. Again, another failure. I went back to reading online, and of course, the other sheet of sandpaper that Wham Bam sends for you is to rough up the build plate. I'm sure I just missed this step in the installation instructions, so again, my fault. Finally, I got the cones of calibration to print successfully.
There it is. There's our first successful print.
My first experience popping a print off of the build plate was anticlimactic. Even though the print did pop off, it was so small that the suction from the other resin was just holding it down on the build plate. But it still just pulled right off. Anyway, it was a success. I printed another exposure test, the Tech one, and again, it didn't really pop off, it just kind of bent with the build plate. But still, a successful print. But now I was confident that my printer could print again to some capacity. So I loaded up my first print. But again, baby steps. To my surprise, it was a success. I slowly upped my game, printing a larger model in the center, then 2 large models at once, then 6 small figurines at once, then build plates full of figurines. So I've been using the flexible build system for like 2 months now, and I've gotta say my opinion completely changed. I freaking love this thing. I mean, removing prints has become a breeze. I mean, like, get out of here. I mean, check this out. Let's do a speed run. The clock starts when I take the lid off my printer, and it stops when I put it back on and the printer is ready to do another print. Ready? Go. I mean, whoa, now I've got very little excuse to not take the prints off my build plate, except for the whole post-processing part. So let's talk about that real quick, because my workflow for using the flexible build plate has changed over time. The official Wham Bam videos recommend that you have a large tub of IPA and that you print out stands that go inside of it, and then you place the used flexible build plates inside of that IPA every time you print. Now I don't know about you, but I can't afford to buy a ton of IPA. I mean, I tried this for a while by putting the used sheet inside of my wash and cure station, but the IPA got dirty really quickly, and it left it so that there was residue on the plates after I've washed them. So what I do is I remove the flexible build plate from the printer, I pop the prints off, and then I place the clean side of the build plate down onto a paper towel, so that the side that the prints cure on is facing up. After setting the used plate down, I take the new plate and hold it very carefully so that I don't get resin on the part that goes on the magnet, and I carefully position it and put it back on the build plate. I checked by wiping the magnet after multiple prints, and resin really doesn't get under there, but you can wipe it every time if you want. Once I've got the lid back on my printer, I turn my attention to the used spring steel sheet. I then just take part of a paper towel with some IPA on it, and I wipe the resin off of the build plate. I then again take another paper towel, spray some IPA on it, and just clean the build plate thoroughly. I'll then flip it around onto a clean paper towel and clean that side as well. After that, I just set it aside and let it dry. And I think that's all you need for this build plate. Then it's just whatever method you use to process your normal prints. Truthfully, the build system has removed a barrier and just made printing more convenient for me. And I think that's worth every penny. There is something to take into account though. On some of my prints that had just a pure flat side that were printed vertically, there are some layer lines there. Now I don't know if they were there before and it's due to my build plate, or if it's due to the spring steel sheet moving slightly every time that it tries to pull from the FEP. I don't know. But it doesn't seem to show up on any of my models, and they're kind of low resolution models, so you'd be able to see it. In all my testing, I've also avoided putting models on the very edge of the build plate. Wham Bam says that if you put it there, the force is more likely to peel the magnet off, so I've just avoided it so far. So if you decide to use this, again, use baby steps, just go a bit at a time and kind of learn the capability of it. Another catch is that I don't really print large models. All of my models are solid and don't have any hollowing, so I can't really speak to suction forces. It seems like Uncle Jesse printed a rather large model on his flexible build system, so I think it's capable, but I can't speak to it. Wham Bam did end up making the flexible build system XTR. I think XTR is extreme. You basically get a thicker, stronger magnet so that you can print larger things and deal with more forces. If you end up getting the flexible build system for yourself, I would spring for the XTR version just so you have less of a chance of anything going wrong. But yes, it's made my resin printing so much more convenient, and I think it'll be less of a headache for you too. I highly recommend these to anyone that is dealing with a lot of separate figurines at once. So what do you think? Do you think the flexible build system will improve your workflow, or do you think it brings more headaches than it's worth? If you already have one, I'd love to hear your experience down in the comments. Let everyone know what you think. If you want to support the channel, you know what to do. But anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye.